leadership success, we often think it's about confidence, charisma, or having the right words at the right time. But what if it's actually about something much more personal? Well, today we're going in deep. We're going to go into what it really takes to move from surface level influence to real lasting impact. And welcome back. We have our guest today who brings a powerful perspective on how self-awareness and emotional intelligence can become your most valuable sales tools. So we'll explore how to understand human behavior, how it unlocks better conversations, and why the best leaders aren't just persuasive, they're deeply present. This isn't just about sales, it's about how you show up. So let's get into it. Welcome back to our viewers and subscribers, and we're going to dive into these insights. I'm Maria White, CEO of Enablement Dojo and co-founder of Good Morning Enablement. Today, we're joined again by Kathy Eastwood, the CEO and founder of E equals Y. Now, Kathy is an accomplished executive with over 25 years of progressive experience in driving success through strategic business planning, but not only that, operational efficiency, employee engagement in large and, well, small privately owned businesses. Now, she's had leadership roles across the spectrum. Just think about it, like HR, operations, finance, sales, SaaS services, customer success, marketing, the whole gambit. She has a plethora of business knowledge in large and smaller organizations. So we are very excited that you're here again, Kathy. Thank you so much for joining us. And before we jump in, please like and subscribe and comment so we can keep bringing you our experts and C-suite guests. Kathy, welcome back to Good Morning Enablement. As I said, we're really excited to see you here again. So
thanks so much for having me.
Excellent. So let's begin with a moment. So I'm just going to think about this for a sec. Was there a time in your life, Kathy, or career when you realized that influence just wasn't enough? Or that was there something deeper was needed to make an impact? So what about from your line of sight? You've gone through the whole company in, executive roles. Tell us a bit more about that.
It's funny, Maria. I actually think it goes back to my childhood and my influence of my dad. Because here's a man that was the president of an international company, an incredible salesperson by title, but he was a leader by heart. And what really made him stand out wasn't just his success, it was the way he treated people. Everyone, from the receptionist to the CEO, he made people feel seen and valued. And he believed that in doing the right things always, integrity, respect, dignity, and those weren't just words, they were how he lived. And so he'd say, people buy from people. And that always stuck with me throughout my career because sales isn't about charisma or clever pitch lines. You have to have all that. But it's about connection, right? It's about the kind of person others will trust and want to work with. And that's, when I think about that, that's what's really influenced me. And he's always reminded me, the cream rises to the top. It's not about pushing your way forward. It's about standing tall in your values and connecting with others.
Understood. Okay. And, just to concur with you in what you made me think about from that wonderful insight that's impacted you from your father is there was a program or a movie from back in the day, I was probably really young, and but I watched it again as a seller, and it was called Glengarry Glen Ross, Always Be Selling. But what was interesting about there was they always hired people, and they used to call it back in the day with a book of business, a Rolodex is what they called it. And I think that speaks to what what your dad was imparting, your father was imparting, that people, that's why the companies were going with the individual, because they built that lasting connection. So it just made me think of it. So I thought I'd share. So I do want to talk about self-awareness, Kathy, not the buzzword, the real things. Self-awareness is a real thing. How has knowing yourself more deeply changed the way you lead, sell, or even just relate to people now?
Yeah, I think self-awareness is everything, right? It helps you shift from reacting to responding. We often try to push, and we need to shift to understanding. And I have a philosophy that I'm very strong about is no one wakes up with bad intent. And we have to believe in that, right? Because we're all shaped by our own experiences, our stories, our wiring. But when we forget that, we are quick to judge, right? And so then we sometimes assume the worst, or we only see what's on the surface. And it's the classic iceberg, right? What we see is just a sliver of what's really going on beneath. So when I started really examining my own intentions, what drives me, what triggers me, what gets me up in the morning, it suddenly helped better relate to others, right? And it's not about fixing them, it's about seeing them
Yeah.
and adjusting how I lead or sell accordingly. And so that level of awareness really opens up room for compassion, for clarity, and really connecting with others.
So that's really interesting. What have you noticed, in your leadership roles or dealing with customers? What happens when someone is truly seen or understood, maybe for the first time? How does that shift the conversation with you and the individual?
Oh my God, I consider it, it's funny. It's like they're exhaling for the first time, right? They're just like, oh, the defenses drop, the conversation suddenly gets real, right? And you're not negotiating or managing or pitching, you're connecting. And when people feel seen, they stop trying to perform, right? And they then start participating. And really, what we want to be doing is sharing the real blockers, right? So, if we're in sales conversations or if you're leading a team through a big change, you really want to know what the real blockers are, the real aspirations. So, when I'm coaching a new manager or working with a CEO, the shift always starts when they feel like they don't have to prove themselves. And that space opens the door for growth, collaboration, and really true impact. And when you can get to that moment, it's really one of the most powerful moments that you can witness.
Absolutely understand. I understand. That's fantastic. So when someone uses a behavioral tool, for example, like I don't know, Clarity 4D for the first time, and sees that their style reflected back in color, what kind of emotional response do you see? What is that? I'm sure you've seen a lot of this, but what is that moment like for the individual? What have you observed?
Yeah, and let me just quickly, for those that aren't familiar with some of these behavioral tools like Clarity 4D, it's a behavioral profiling tool based on Carl Jung's psychology. So if you know Myers-Briggs or DISCs, it's similar, but Clarity 4D uses a simple color-based model that's easy to remember and apply. And it helps you understand how you naturally show up, how others are going to perceive you, and then how to flex your style to connect with others more effectively. So there's 4 colors. Red is direct, fast-paced, results-driven. And that's me. You see me wearing my red glasses?
Mhm.
That is me to a T. Someone that has blue energy is more analytical, they're more precise, they're more detail-oriented. Green energy, they're supportive, steady, people-focused. And yellow is very enthusiastic, creative, and big picture. And what I love about this is it's not about putting people in boxes, but it's about increasing that self-awareness we were talking about and empathy so that you can really build stronger and more effective relationships. So when we share a Clarity 4D assessment, you asked about what's kind of that aha moment. There's usually a mix of awe and relief.
Wow.
People will say to me, like, yep, that's me. Absolutely. Now I understand why I react that way. But I love when it goes further than that, right? And then the light bulb really comes on and they're like, oh, wait a minute. You mean not everyone's like me?
There you go.
And that's what makes that invisible visible, right? It
Yeah.
helps people to appreciate their own strengths by then, but also giving them a language to understand how other people feel. And so it's no longer personal, it's what your preferences, right? I prefer short, bulleted, to the point messages. And I respect that other people want to know, why are we doing this? What's the impact? How is it going to affect other people, right? So it's just a language, and people are like, oh, wow,
Yeah.
I'm different, but that's okay.
The light bulb moment of who you really are and how you show up. That's fantastic. So in your experience, so now they've kind of understood how they show up. In your experience, what gets in the way of honest, clear communication inside organizations?
I think the biggest blockers are fear,
Yeah.
ego, and assumptions. right?
Right.
We tend to let that worry us, right? And we're afraid of how we're going to be perceived. And that insecurity, sometimes, we mask it as confidence, but it actually creates misalignment.
Yeah.
So when you create that space for real connections with leaders and you admit that you may not know something and you're willing to listen first, then you start to open the door. And that's how you really can start to engage with others and drive change.
Thank you, Kathy. That's awesome. Now, people love to connect with people through stories. So I wondered if you could take us into a story of a time when applying these techniques turned into a tough relationship or a missed opportunity or an opportunity into something meaningful.
Yeah, and since we were talking about sales, I thought I'd bring a story to the table where it was about a big deal that we were working on. It was in project management, selling a tool set. And it was the end of the year. We're desperate to close, right? And so the team's full of energy. We've got a lot of red energy in the room, right? And we're trying to come up with the ROI. We're coming hard in with the numbers for the client, the bottom line impact, all of the efficiency gains, but it wasn't landing. It was really weird. The buyers were quiet. The more we pushed on the bottom line, the more they stepped back and they were really resisting. And what they were much more people centric and they had a lot more green energy. Right. And so what they were hearing about our push to the bottom line is you don't care about our team, right? They're just a number to you. And what they needed to was reassurance that the people would be supported. So once we recognized that our personality and behaviors and focus wasn't aligning to them and we shifted, we started speaking their language. We talked about how this tool could really reduce stress, improve team morale, make their jobs easier, and the whole tone changed, right? They leaned in and we closed the deal, right? Not just because we proved the value, which was critical, but we connected to what they really wanted to hear and what really mattered to them.
That's fantastic. So we're coming to a close now. I'm going to ask one last question. So, if you were the leader whisperer and you could whisper one truth to every leader who still believes sales is just about persuasion, what would you say?
I'd say stop trying to convince people and to get the transaction and really start trying to connect, to build a relationship and add value, right? Authentic sales leadership isn't about pushing your message. It's about understanding theirs. When you know who they are, when you can emotionally meet someone where they are and speak their language, you shift the dynamic entirely, right? Because at the end of the day, people don't buy from someone who's persuasive. They buy from someone who makes them feel understood. That's what influences and becomes real impact. And taking it all the way back around, right? Just like my dad taught me, it's about dignity, respect, and doing the right thing. That's what lasts.
Yes, amen to that. So, Kathy, thank you so much for your insight. You know, what really stood out to me today is this: selling isn't just about telling your story, it's about hearing theirs. So, when you know yourself and you truly see others, something shifts. Influence all of a sudden becomes impact because you are being real, you're being authentic, and that's really important. So, if you're leading a team, running a department, or driving change, this conversation is your reminder that people skills aren't soft. So, they're the hardest ones to master and the most powerful. So, thank you so much, Kathy, once again for being with us. I could talk to you for hours. And as always, lead with heart and the rest will follow. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.